Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Leveraging Planned Giving in an Uncertain World. I'm Nick Cintineo, Senior Investment Consultant with Manning & Napier's Endowment Foundation team, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator for today. I think we have a great topic, and I think we can all get a lot out of today's discussion. From my perspective, there's definitely been a confluence of different factors that favor planned giving recently. And I mean, there are big picture trends that I think we've all sort of known have been coming for years. And there's just sort of a tremendous amount of wealth that will be changing hands over the next 20 years or so. But I guess I'm also thinking of just all the near-term things that have happened in the past year and that might happen in the near future that might really encourage people to start to take a fresh look at their estate plans. The pandemic is a good example, I think. I think the pandemic has put a lot of people into planning mode. It's certainly been a significant event for many people. And a lot of surveys show that there's been an actual uptick in people thinking about updating their estate plans based on that. And then potential tax changes are another example. I mean, no one really knows for sure what changes might come down the pipe, but I think the overwhelming trend is that the Biden administration wants to increase taxes. And that's got a lot of people thinking about their estates and thinking about how to structure their giving perhaps differently. So it just seems like we're living in a world with a lot of uncertainty right now, but planned giving can be an attractive tool today, given all these different factors that we know are swirling about. I think that organizations that have a robust planned giving program are definitely in a stronger position when they're asking for gifts, because it's just another choice that you can offer your donors. They're definitely in a stronger position financially to support their mission when these gifts come through. And maybe most importantly, you're able to give donors what they want. And for many people, that's the ability to leave a legacy towards a cause they care about. So it just seems like an excellent time to start a planned giving program if you don't have one, or to invest in more in planned giving, in your planned giving efforts, and then also to cultivate planned giving prospects. It seems like a good time to do all those things right now. And today, the bottom line is, and sort of why we're here today, is we'd like to help with that. And we have with us two professionals who, as I've gotten to know over the past few weeks in preparing, have just a tremendous amount of knowledge when it comes to estate giving, when it comes to planned giving and estate planning. And so we're very lucky to have with us Juan Bendick and Jack Simpson. Juan is a partner at Hahn, Loeser and Parks, LLP, and certified by the Florida Bar as a board certified specialist in wills, trusts, and estates. His practice includes the administration of complex wills and trusts, tax-efficient estate plans, estate administration, and asset protection planning. He's on the board of directors of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, the Naples Zoo, Goodwill Industries of Southwest Florida, and the Florida Humanities Council. And in addition, Juan is chairman of the planned giving committees at Florida Gulf Coast University and the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. He's a frequent speaker and writer on estate planning issues and a 40 Under 40 award winner in Gulf Shore Business Magazine. And Jack is the president of Ballad Health Foundation in Johnson City, Tennessee, which supports Ballad Health, which is an integrated healthcare system operating a family of 21 hospitals in Tennessee and Virginia. Prior to joining Ballad, Jack held a number of development roles at his undergraduate alma mater, Milligan University, most recently as vice president for institutional advancement. He holds a master's degree in philanthropic studies from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. And within his community, he's served as district advancement chairman for the Boy Scouts of America and taken on roles within his church as a board member and finance team leader. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them throughout the webinar using Zoom's question box. And then when we conclude today's prepared questions, we'll spend any remaining time answering questions that have been submitted. And if we run short on time and are unable to answer your question, we will personally follow up with you after the webinar. And then also for your convenience, a recording of this webinar will also be available for replay. Gentlemen, I look forward to learning a lot more about this topic. I think all of our audience does today too. So I think we can get started. First off, Jack and Juan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Nick. It's a real honor to be here with Juan.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here.
Great. So the first question we have is kind of an introductory question. I was wondering if you could tell us about your experience with plan giving and the roles it plays at the different organizations that you work with. So Juan, let me shoot that one over to you to start.
Okay. I've been fortunate in that I've seen both sides of plan giving. And what I mean by both sides is initially I was involved on the plan giving side from the client perspective. As an attorney, I would have a client that would come to see me and say, hey, Juan, I'd like to make this gift to this organization, or I'd like to set up a charitable remainder trust. So I got to see what they were thinking and what their motivations were. Later on in my career, I became involved with different not-for-profit institutions. And some of them have ranged from very mature plan giving programs to others that are just starting a plan giving program. So I've also seen it from the other side, from the side of the charitable institution that wants to get a gift. So I feel that I have a really good understanding of the side of it, from what motivates the client and also how the charitable entity looks at it. So I feel that's very valuable experience. And what I'll say about plan giving from an institutional perspective is that it is the cornerstone, in my opinion, of a good fundraising program. In and of itself, it's not, you can't just rely on a plan giving program, but it is the cornerstone of a good fundraising program. It does take some time for a young institution that's just starting out. It does take some time. It's a lot of it's a lot of seeding plants, putting seeds in the ground and waiting for them to grow. You're not going to get results overnight, and even later on, even with institutions that have much more mature programs that have been around for many years, they don't know what they're going to be getting in planned gifts each year. It's a variable. They're often surprised. Wow, we didn't know we were here, or we didn't know we were there. I've been told by institutions that for every gift that they know about, or every planned gift they know about, there might be 5 out there that they don't know about. So it's definitely, as you said, Nick, a planned giving is gonna, with the different tax changes that we're likely to see, planned giving is going to take an even more important role here with planning. Jack?
Yeah, my experience, has been during my career, probably 5 years into my career, Nick, I was asked to take over kind of the marketing component of the planned giving area in the university that I served at. Philosophically, I think there's different thoughts on plan giving. Some folks view plan giving as a separate discipline within an advancement shop. I tend to favor a more integrated approach. In other words, I've told my staff sometimes that I think of plan giving in some ways, I think of it like a car transaction, like buying a car, making a major gift. Interestingly, it could be about the same amount too, but kind of think in terms of when I go to buy a car and I'm sitting at the dealership, I've got 3 options through which I can pay for it. I can just write a check for the whole thing and pay cash. if I'm sufficiently liquid and think that's a good way to deploy my resources. I can finance it over a period of 5 years, like a traditional pledge, for instance, or more or less, depending on again my appetite. Or I can lease the car where I drive it for a period of time and then return it. And I kind of think of at the end of the day, I've still bought a car. It's just I've paid for it in 3 different ways. Well, planned giving to me kind of fits in a development shop in a similar role. It's just another method through which a generous person might see their gift funded through their, it works with whatever makes sense for them. So that's been kind of my experience. I would say that I'm largely a self-taught planned giving officer. I've had the advantage of being able to go to some conferences where I've learned more. But I think that, I think there's a lot of folks that get intimidated by it and think that, you need to go to law school or need to have a JD to be a planned giving officer or to work in planned gifts. And I guess I kind of would push back on that notion a little bit. If we have some folks from small shops who aren't necessarily, who don't have the advantage of a JD, I think that's okay. I think they can do some really meaningful work in a planned gift circle that helps support their organization. And I would echo Juan's comment that a lot of the gifts that you get in an organization you won't know about, and you won't know until after the donor has passed away. Just this year, for instance, one of the biggest gifts that we got in the current fiscal year that we're in was an estate gift from somebody who we had never even heard of, and she left, childless, didn't wed. I think she had no children, if I remember the story correctly. And left her entire estate basically to 4 different charities, of which we were 1/4 of those. So, you can really benefit tremendously as an organization just by having a good program and sending out some consistent messaging.
That's a nice little surprise.
Yes, it was a very nice little surprise.
No, the great stories. And I love the analogy, Jack, about the car. I think you're right that we do have sort of a range of different experience probably in our audience today. I think we've got some organizations who probably want to know the best way, to start to build a planned giving program. And I think that's sort of a good lead into our next question. Both of you, what do you think is the best way to build and grow a strong planned giving program if you're sort of starting from square one? Mm-hmm. Jack, let me shoot this over to you to start.
Okay. Well, if I were starting from scratch, a few things I would do is look in my donor file for folks that have given relatively modest amounts of time, but very consistently. So multi-year donors. And I would make sure that I was doing a good job of amping up my outreach efforts to those people, because that tends to be kind of a prototypical strong planned gift prospect as somebody who's given relatively modest amounts over a longer period of time. I think in a lot of cases, those are folks who don't feel like they can make a very sizable gift out of their current living resources, but when they pass away, they can make a more significant gift. I would want to have some kind of a system to code those people in my database of records. So if I use a Razor's Edge database or one of the other brands, I would make sure that I had some kind of a method to code those people so that I could keep track of the ones that I was aware of. And I would treat them in the same way that I would treat my major gift donors. So if you have a major gift society, whatever constitutes a major gift at your organization, if it's $1,000 a year or $10,000 a year, if you have a lifetime giving society or a club for folks that are at some threshold, most of the organizations I've been with have been, in the $100,000 range is kind of the lifetime giving society. But I would find a way to identify and recognize out that group of people and treat them in the exact same way that I would treat somebody who'd given me a one-time gift of $100,000 or who'd given me $1,000 to my annual fund in any given year. I would give them that same kind of treatment. And then I would also find the services of a good planned gift marketing firm to help develop a good, consistent cadence of messaging. Yesterday in my mail, I got the planned giving newsletter that our organization offers. And we've selected an outsourced vendor that we can utilize for that. They provide all the content, so we don't have to, write the legalese articles about IRA distributions and that kind of thing. They have all the content, and then they have branded it to match our institutional or organizational brand standards. And I think we're on a twice a year program with them. And then they do an e-newsletter follow-up on that. In about 2 weeks, we'll send an e-newsletter out. We're also under a contract where they maintain a plant, or they maintain a website for us. So that's a path to go to as well. And then finally, you can get other vendors to do brochures and stuff like that. But I think the big thing I would work on is just being consistent about my marketing.
Yeah. Juan, what do you think about this question too, sort of from the startup perspective?
Sure, and I think Jack made many excellent points that I agree with. But I think, for an institution that's just starting out, it's important to start with the what I call the easier stuff. You don't want to go out there and tout, hey, do you know what a charitable lead annuity trust is? Do you know what you can do with a charitable remainder trust? Because most people aren't going to know what that is, and it's going to sound really complicated, and they're going to just tune out or not pay attention. So the most basic thing you can do is just, hey, put us in your will. You don't have the liquidity to help us right now. Put us in your will. That's one of the easiest things you can do, and there's some other easy things that you can do. Like, hey, you don't need your required minimum distribution from your IRA this year, or you don't want to take it into taxable income. Do you know what that you can give it to us? So starting small, and also don't be afraid to ask. I know the old school way of doing things was, we don't want to be too pushy. We don't want to ask. We just want to let them know what we do, and then hopefully, Mr. or Mrs. Donor will think, hey, what a great way to help this institution. But in today's world, I think you have to be more aggressive, and you have to make the ask. And also, you have to mix in there, probably the most important thing is, remind the donor of the good that your institution does. This is the good that this is what we pump into society, just like Apple pumps out iPhones and iPads. This is what we pump out. This is the good that we create and how we benefit society. And to keep that going, we need you to support us. And did you know that a very easy way to support us is just to put a provision in your will for us? So I think you have to send that message. Don't be afraid to ask. Also, I agree with communication being key, staying in touch with donors, paying attention to the people that make gifts to your institution, and I think that's crucial. And having some sort of club or society where, hey, if you've made a gift to us or you've included us in your estate plan, guess what? You're going to be part of our legacy society. And maybe sending them, some places will have an annual lunch for them, or maybe in today's virtual world, you can even do some sort of virtual meeting for them, but make them feel like they're being recognized for their contribution to the entity. That's important, because I've seen, in my experience as an attorney, I've seen the silliest, what outsiders would consider the silliest things. You know, I had a client once where he made what I would consider a relatively modest gift to an institution, and they didn't know this, but he had a major gift to them in his estate planning documents, and he never got a thank you card or a call or anything recognizing the more modest gift. And he was so put off by that he came into my office and he decided to make the gift he was making to that entity to another entity. And he mentioned to me the reason why. And I just remember thinking, boy, I'd hate to be that institution that, you know, had they just sent a card or called him, they'd be getting this large bequest at his death. So communication is key, staying in touch with the donors. And you know, and what Jack said before is giving them the ideas, especially things that are relevant. Our tax laws are about to change, you know, so you know, we could potentially see capital gains rates at near all-time highs. You know, so hey, you know, you don't want to pay the capital gains on this, but you want to retain an income stream from it. Here's how. You know, and so give them, like as Jack had pointed out, give them the ideas. So then, you know, they'll call you and say, hey, I got your email or your newsletter, and I like that. Can you tell me more about it? So you know, and then just be persistent. You know, like I said before, a planned giving program is not born overnight. It's you have to plant a lot of seeds, but over time, those seeds will grow into, you know, hopefully into beautiful flowers. So being persistent is important.
You know, I think you both mentioned kind of like the ability to develop relationships over time, and how important that is to planned giving. I'm wondering, for the next question, what do you think is the typical profile of a legacy donor, and how do you step into the mindset of that donor, and what do they think about when they're creating their will? Now, that's probably the next step, as after you've sort of established a program, is really start to step into the mindset of that potential donor and live a day in their shoes, you know, so to speak. Juan, what do you think about that question? What do you think about what really motivates your clients or the donors on your nonprofit work to do a legacy gift?
Sure. So, you know, I found in my work as an attorney, I found that clients are either charitably inclined or they're not charitably inclined. And those that are charitably inclined, they typically have had some involvement with the institution of some kind. They've either you know, for example, they you know, they had a loved one go into hospice, and so, you know, they appreciate hospice and they want to give some money to hospice, or it's a cause that that they're very involved with. They think education is very important, and they want to help. You know, they want to help underprivileged kids in a certain area with education. So, you know, they typically will have some issue that they're close with, that they're tied into, that they're invested in some way. And you know, when they're making I've had clients that have made, pretty major gifts to different institutions. And typically they will want to know certain things about the institution. They want to make sure that the institution is going to last, it's going to be there. They want to make sure that it's financially sound, that they want to make sure that the money or the assets that they give to the institution are going to be used in a way that's going to further the institution's purposes. And they want, if they make lifetime gifts, usually they want some sort of update about how their money is being used. So typically what I've encountered with clients that are making major gifts is they're going to want to know these things before they make the gift, that's why staying in touch with these type of individuals becomes so important, because if they know about your mission, they know what you do, you're out there saying, hey, you could help us by doing this, and it happens to be something that they're invested in, they're gonna, when it comes time to do their estate plan, it's something that they're gonna consider your institution. They're gonna say, hey, I heard about you guys. This is the type of thing that I wanna benefit. Now, what's going to be interesting here when the tax laws change is, there will be some clients that aren't necessarily charitably inclined, that may in certain situations become charitably inclined if it can benefit them from a tax perspective. So I think it's early to be able to say what the tax laws are going to be. We have several proposals out there, but there are not as many as people think. But there are clients who will become charitably inclined when there's a tax reason for them to do so.
Jack, what do you think about the profile of a typical legacy donor?
Yeah, I was thinking about it as we were talking about it, and the thing that I always come back to in terms of profile, at least if I were looking for folks to reach out to, is loyalty. And that's really just jumping off of what Juan said, but I mean, it's really just about how connected they are to your cause. How much do they believe in what you're doing? I think Juan, you probably saw the smirk when you said some people are inclined and some people aren't. That's been my experience. They're just, some people are givers, some people are not. And when I am calling on donors, either at my alma mater or here, you pretty quickly realize that somebody who's supporting you is probably supporting numerous other charities too. So it's just kind of an interesting mix. It's like they either got the gene or they don't. But in terms of kind of on a real macro level, if I were looking to folks that might be liable to support our cause, I would look for loyalty. Somebody who's made gifts, 3 or 4 years in a row is probably way more likely, and I don't even say probably, they're way more likely to make a gift than somebody who you've never heard of, I think. Of course I say that, and then I think about the 2 estate gifts that I got this year, the one that I mentioned and the other one that I didn't, to our hospice house fund, that both of those are like, I've never heard of them before. But if you're looking for people that you could reach out to, it's going to be loyalty. I think when you're thinking about in terms of how do you continue to portray that, or portray that you're a worthy charity, I would also focus on the stability and the management that you have, your leadership, help folks see that you have a good vision and a good plan going forward. That was kind of something that as Juan was talking about, I was thinking about the importance of that, of being able to make sure, being able to instill confidence in folks' mind that that you know what you're doing and that your charity is on mission and plans to stay on mission for the foreseeable future. Because, you know, when you talk about somebody's estate gift, ultimately, even though I'm this big proponent of planned giving being a broad spectrum of gifts. So whether it's an IRA distribution, it's a planned gift, or whether it's a charitable remainder trust, it's a planned gift, or whether it's a beneficiary designation, it's a planned gift. There's still an awful lot of them that come through wills, and those gifts are made after the donor's death. Juan probably has better stats than I do on the time from when somebody puts you in their will to the time when they pass away, but I would argue that it's probably a 7 to 10 year lag between the final will and the date of death. And so, you know, you're really dealing with somebody who's making something with quite a bit of forethought, which is why I think that loyalty is important too, and why it's important to make sure that, you know, you want to instill confidence in them that your organization's still going to be here doing good work in 7 to 10 years, because, you know, they're not probably drafting their will with plans to, you know, hop on an elevator with a busted cable on the way out of the lawyer's office, you know, realistically. So,
well, and that's sort of a, I'm glad you brought up the stat about sort of the lag time that's necessary. That's a good stat to have on hand, I think, and sort of, I'm sure it's different for every organization, but just to generalize it, yeah, I mean, this is an investment for the future. You make it today, and hopefully it pays out in 5+ years.
Yeah, unlike a 3 to 5 year pledge where somebody signs a pledge card today, and, you know, we're going to send them annual invoices or whatever, and they're going to make their installments over the next, you know, relatively short period of time. This is a long game gift. Yeah.
Now I know we've already talked a little bit about sort of the marketing aspect of a planned giving program, but is there anything you guys would like to add about literally marketing a planned giving program, like from the materials or the websites, et cetera? Or when do you think is a good time to actually bring up planned giving with a prospect? Do you think there's a specific age or event or life event when you think is a good time to bring it up? Jack, how about you start with this one?
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, you know, I would argue that you just want to be relatively consistent as you can. And some of the things that Juan talked about, you know, I threw out the idea of, you know, hey, get a marketing firm to produce a newsletter for you, but, you know, you really don't even need to do something that complicated. If you have a marketing program already, or a newsletter that you put out as an organization electronically in print in whatever form or fashion, there's an opportunity to dedicate a little bit of column space to talking about planned gifts that you've received. That's a really nice way to keep planned giving in folks' minds. That's one of the things that we do with the services that we work with is, you know, when we find out somebody who's put us in their estate plans and they're willing to talk about it, if they're willing to be on the front cover of a planned giving newsletter or in a magazine as, hey, here's such and so, they agreed to make a gift through their estate plans, and here's why, and so that there's ways that folks can see a path to making a gift like that and can identify with somebody. I think that's a beneficial strategy. I think in terms of timing life cycle, and that'd be interesting to hear Juan's perspective on this. You know, I would argue that probably, you know, marriage, divorce, sale of a business, you know, when your daughter or children get married, you know, any of those kind of life trigger points. If a donor, a family member passes away, if donor's parents, for instance, pass away, and there's, you know, a potential bequest, those are all things that might drive somebody to, you know, contemplate their mortality and go down and see Juan. So that's a good occasion to get it in front of folks. If I were just gutting it out on ages, I would say probably somewhere in the 60s to 70s is kind of the sweet spot. I'm in my early 50s, so in planned giving years, I'm a pup. I think 60 to 70 is probably a really sweet spot, but you don't want to ignore the younger audience. If you do, it'll be to your peril, because you can oftentimes get into it, you know, kind of get the first pass into a gift, you know, in the 40s and 50s, but, you know, the final estate plan is probably not going to get written until somebody's in their 60s or 70s, at least in my mind. When's a good time to bring it up with a prospect? I think if you have a campaign going on, you can build some language around that. You can kind of create an impetus to have that discussion about, hey, we're in the midst of a campaign. One of the things that we're trying to do is identify some future bequests. Is there any reason why you wouldn't consider including Ballad Health Foundation in your estate plans? Some kind of opportunity like that could give you something to talk about. We're on the front side of the capital campaign right now as an organization, and it's giving us some opportunities to have those discussions with donors who are saying, hey, I can't make a significant gift right now. I'm doing some things for my kids in terms of wealth transfer, but we think that we might be able to do something through our estate plans. And then you can kind of use that as an opportunity to probe off of and build into some discussions with them as well at that point.
Juan, what do you think?
Well, I think Jack covered a lot, and I agree with everything he said. One thing I wanted to mention about marketing the planned giving program in the hopefully near post-COVID world, pre-COVID, what I saw had a lot of success with reaching out to potential donors was, if the institution had some sort of event. For example, I was working with one institution who had a wine tasting. It was a wine tasting. They invited some people who had given funds to the institution before. They got a nice turnout. They had this professional lead everyone through the wine tasting. They had a very nice presentation about what the institution does, what the different programs they have, et cetera. And then at the end, they had a very soft ask about, hey, if you want to help us, this is how you can do that. So I think in-person programs, getting people out to things that you're doing. Another thing I think works is, especially if you with the older the donor base, which I think I'll talk about this in a second, but with the older client, with the older donor base, they're going to be more inclined to do things. But older retired people, a lot of times they're looking for things to do. So if you have volunteer opportunities within your organization, get them, hey, we have these volunteer opportunities, get them out, get them volunteering to do whatever it is that you do. Yep. And introduce, and slowly introduce the ideas to them that here's how you can help our organization. So, I think things like that, in-person things, in addition to all the other stuff we've talked about, will help. As far as, I agree with Jack. When I first started my legal career, I was on the East Coast of Florida, which had I had a much younger clientele. And, a lot of times, all they want to do is just have a basic document, and you tell them, well, what about all these other issues? What about this tax planning? And, they're, oh, no, we'll worry about that later. We'll get to that next year, and next year, becomes a year after and year after. Then I'm originally from the West Coast of Florida. I moved back to the West Coast of Florida like 16, 17 years ago. And it's a different clientele. The clientele is, probably most of my clients are in their 70s or older, and they're much more serious about their estate plans. I mean, I have clients who think about their estate plans every day. And so they take changes in the tax laws very seriously. I've been inundated with client meetings ever since President Biden won office. Clients concerned about, well, what do I need to be doing? And so these same type of older clients, they're going to be more inclined to pull a trigger on a large pledge or put a large bequest or distribution in their estate planning documents. I do think that the older client is the one that's going to be the one that's more inclined to do things, to take action. And as far as, when is a good time, really, any time is a good time, to bring up a planned giving. I think, like what I said before, you mustn't be afraid to ask. I know a lot of people are afraid to, they think it's a put off, or, oh no, they're going to think we're too pushy, and they're going to, they're not going to give us anything if they think we're too pushy or we're too greedy. I think that's yesterday's world. I think in today's world, it's okay to tell them, look, we really could use your help. If you believe in our mission and you think our mission is important, this is how you can help prolong the mission, and this is how you can help prolong the mission after you're gone, and make sure that it's here for future generations.
Juan, you started talking a little bit sort of about taxes and current events. Let's talk a little bit more about that, I guess. How are current events influencing planned giving today more precisely? Whether it's a pandemic or tax changes or politics or what have you. Well, how do you think current events, or what role do you think current events are playing in planned giving today?
Sure. Well, the pandemic surprisingly affected different portions of the population differently. Obviously it had terrible effects with some people. They became unemployed, and they've suffered a great deal. But with others, it actually, especially with the more wealthy, affluent part of the population, they actually, believe it or not, were better off in terms of not. When I say better off, I don't mean because of the pandemic, but they spent less money. They weren't traveling. They weren't going on vacations. They weren't going on spending money on things that they normally spent. They were home. The stock market, while it went down originally, then it roared back. Nick, you would know better than me.
Yep.
So I think, the wealthier, more affluent part of the population with the pandemic found themselves with more money in their pockets and less time with much more time to do things. So they had more time to sit around and think, I think I want to get around. I've been meaning to talk to this institution about this pledge, or I want to renegotiate this pledge or give them more money. And so they're sitting home with nothing to do. And all of a sudden, they'll give you a call. They'll give you a call and want to talk about this stuff. I mean, I was surprised at the amount of calls that I had during the pandemic. This time last year, I was a couple of months before, March of last year, I thought, wow, it's going to be a really bad year for the law firm. And it was the opposite. I got calls every day from clients because they were just sitting at home, and they said, well, it's a good time to call Juan and revisit my estate plan now. I'm sure, Nick, you probably went through the same thing with clients that wanted to revisit their stock, their investment portfolios. And right now, now that we're starting to slowly come out of this pandemic, the big thing is tax changes. I mean, my phone's been ringing off the hook with clients concerned about tax changes. And like I said it previously, there is there are some clients who may not be charitably inclined to a great degree, but tax changes will make them much more charitably inclined. So right now you can sell an asset and incur capital gains at 23.8%, basically. And if you're in the highest tax rate, but potentially, this time next year, it's going to be over 40%. If and again, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what the law is going to be, but one of the things that's been proposed is a much higher capital gains tax rate. So, are people going to want to sell assets if they're going to incur a 40-something% tax? And the other thing that they've talked about doing away with is right now, if I die with an appreciated asset, when I leave it to my heirs, the gain is forgiven. I get my heir gets a brand new income tax basis, and the gain is forgiven. They've talked about doing away with that. So, if my child inherits an appreciated asset that some stock or something like that, where there's no gain forgiveness like there is now, and there's a 40-something% capital gains rate, that's going to make certain clients who may not be charitably inclined to a great deal much more charitably inclined. They're gonna think, why don't I just give this to charity rather than give it to the government? Or maybe a charitable remainder trust makes sense. So I think tax changes that we have, potential tax changes that we have, are going to have a great influence on planned giving.
Jack, I'd like to switch over to this next question for you, because I think this is one that you're really well suited to weigh in on. But how do you think donors prefer to structure their gifts? And I guess structure can mean a few different things. Either gifting now versus a bequest, or gifting in an unrestricted manner versus an endowed gift, restricted. For planned gifts, in your experience, how do donors prefer to structure their gifts in that way?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think it's kind of difficult to universalize it because each donor is going to have a different perspective. Going back to what Juan was saying about the tax policies, taxes, in my mind, taxes are not a motivator necessarily to gifts, but what they do is impact the timing and the asset choice of the gift. So for instance, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of donors who favored IRA gifts through their required minimum distribution, because that was, they were looking at a non-taxable estate otherwise, aside from any IRD type assets. And so they were interested in minimizing their current income tax bill by, shielding off a portion of that through their by transferring assets out of their IRA. If we go to the scenario that Juan just talked about with the, double capital gains tax, I suspect that you'll see more stock gifts and more charitable remainder trusts for folks who want to have a continued income stream. But I think, so it's going to kind of depend on the donor. I also think it depends on the organization. Higher educational institutions have a permanence built into them, even though they close every day, or may not every day. We tend to think of higher ed institutions as being permanent, and they have a long-standing mission. We always think there's going to be a next generation we want to educate. If you're the American Cancer Society, for instance, a planned giving program probably looks different because, your goal is to eradicate cancer, and nobody wants to think about creating a permanently restricted endowment to permanently eradicating a disease that we hope will be permanently eradicated in our lifetimes.
Right.
And that's one of the important things is, to kind of denote that endowed gifts by their nature are permanent. The charity is only able to use a limited, they can't use the corpus of the gift. So, you know, the rule of thumb I always use is 5% of the corpus of the gift. So you would want to stack a unrestricted gift towards the Cancer Society so that they could have as much money as possible in the year that they get the request to meet the needs. So I think that's probably a lot of it. You just kind of have to listen to your donor and be flexible.
Yeah, great point on sort of the idea of permanence versus non-permanence. That's I think there's definitely different tailoring it to a specific organization is important for sure. I think that's probably a good example of a mistake that we might see in some places, but I guess that's also a good lead into our final question, which I guess is for both of you guys. What are organizations missing when it comes to plan giving? What mistakes do you see them making? What makes you cringe a little bit when you see them being made? Juan, how about we start with you for some examples of this?
Sure. And just one quick comment on the last question is, from the attorney perspective, and this can tie into this question as well, is that, there has historically been this reluctance on donors to just make unrestricted gift, to say to the charity, here you go, here's the money, use it however you think is best, because donors have had this thought of hey, they're going to use it for overhead, and overhead is bad. But for these organizations to be able to run, they need overhead. They can't do the good that the donor wants. They can't pump out the good things without the overhead. Just like sorry about that. Just like Apple can't pump out more iPhones without overhead. The American Heart Association can't do the good things that they do without overhead. So I think it's important for organizations to educate donors on that. We need to pay our people. We need to pay our employees. We need to have good employees that can help us with our mission. We need to be able to spend money on things that further the mission. The other thing is, don't, from the organization's perspective, don't make it difficult on the donor. Because on the attorney side, I've worked with organizations that act like they're doing you a favor by you giving them money. They've made it difficult to the point where, the client has said to me, do they understand that we're giving them money? Do they understand that we're giving them money? And if you make it too difficult for them, they're not going to give you any more. They're not going to give you any more, and they might write you out of their plan. You have to just bend over backwards to make it easy for the donor, and also be nice to the donors' professionals, to their CPA, to their to their attorney. Treat them the same way that you would treat the donor. Don't give them a hard time, because they're their trusted advisor. However you treat them, they're going to go back and tell your donor, this guy, this organization, wow, the donor's going to say, well, why was my bill so high, Juan? Oh, they made me rewrite the pledge 4 different times. That's why they wouldn't accept it. They kept asking me to rewrite it. So Jack, I don't know what what you think.
No, I would agree. I don't want to make your life hard, Juan. If I guess if we're pitching over to me on most organizations are missing, to me, I think the thing that frustrates me the most is the organizations that get real siloed in it, and really view plan giving as a separate discipline. And, and I've been in some kind of mid-sized shops in my career. And I get why they do that, because we tend to assign production values or production goals to our team members. And that doesn't always serve us well, because that means that Juan and I are both, we both feel like we have to justify our salaries. And so we're running against each other. I personally try to break down those walls as much as I can and try to create an environment where, we're all pulling on the same goal. And at the end of the day, if one of us has the donor base that pulls us a little further, great, as long as we're all doing our jobs and, logging the calls and the visits and making meaningful contact with people. So I think that would probably be one of the main things that I would say is, we don't need to be estate planners. We don't need to be attorneys. Let Juan do that. I think that's another important takeaway that kind of bounces off of that. And just be faithful and consistent in your messaging.
Great messages. Gentlemen, thank you for this information. I think these are both, just the experiences that you have, the stories that you can share with us have been great. So thank you, I guess is where I'll close it up. Thank you for joining us today and for weighing in on these questions. Up here on the screen, we have the contact information for both of our presenters. I definitely encourage everyone really to find out more information about these two organizations that our presenters are closely involved with. Jack works for Ballad Health, which again it was created to improve the health of people in and around Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, and North Carolina. And it's committed to preserving healthcare access, expanding research and medical education, and addressing some of the region's most pressing health issues. And then Juan, again, is a board member of Florida Humanities, whose mission is to preserve, promote, and share the history, literature, culture, and personal stories that offer Floridians a better understanding of themselves, their communities, and their state. And it works with local humanities organizations such as libraries, museums, historical societies. And then to date, Florida Humanities has awarded over 14 million toward grants and public projects. So I've gotten to know these organizations pretty well, especially in sort of preparing for this call. And I can tell you, I think they're both tremendous resources for their communities. Definitely worth checking out. So thank you. And a little shout out to Ballad Health and Florida Humanities. And then if you please feel free to reach out to Manning & Napier. You can learn more about our investment strategies and the services that we provide to our clients. You can download our latest nonprofit magazine. It's called Impact, or you can join our mailing list. We're always trying to put out useful information, useful content, both on the investment side and the fundraising side. So definitely please check out manning-napier.com/sign up. That's about all we have for the prepared remarks today. Just as a quick reminder, you can submit questions through Zoom's question box here. And I see there are a few questions. So yeah, gentlemen, if we're ready to move on to questions, we can do that now. The first one we have is, it says, how can we have effective communication to donors to take the time to change their will to include our nonprofit in the distribution? And so I think that gets a little bit into the time and expense it takes to go through the effort of changing a will. So what would you say to that question? Jack or I guess either of you guys.
What can you repeat that, Nick? What was the question?
How can we have effective communication to donors to take the time to change their will to include our nonprofit in the distribution?
How can you take the time? I think you need to motivate them. You need to, like we were talking about earlier, you need to convince them that your mission is a mission that aligns with their beliefs and their goals, and it's something important enough that they need to go to see their attorney about and change their document about. Getting back to the older, younger clientele, I mean, I have some clients that I see, believe it or not, they're in their 70s, 80s. I might see them 2 or 3 times a year just on changes to their estate plan. They're always adjusting things. They're always fixing things. So, you have them volunteer at your organization. They see firsthand, wow, this is what they do. I want to be part of this. They're going to call me and they're going to make that change.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jack.
All right. I would go back to the being consistent in your messaging. If you've got a newsletter, find ways to weave in some kind of a message about people that have left you in their plans, or people who've made more complex gifts. Even if it's under the guise of celebrating the gift, you can talk about their gift and in a way that hopefully motivates others to do so. Consistent messaging, and I saw that we had one on budget allocations. I was sitting here trying to think through my budget allocations, which is probably not a fair way to do it, but I would say if you're probably budgeting 1 or 2% of your annual budget towards of your advancement budget towards some kind of plan giving marketing, at least that's been what I've done, which isn't very much, quite frankly. I don't think you have to carve off a ton of money towards it, I guess is part of what I'm saying, because you can weave it into other places as well. And I think the other thing that I would just argue is just do it, man. It's the Nike rule. It gets intimidating when we talk about plan giving. And I've talked about, I've got a newsletter program that I've contracted with a company out of Indianapolis that does a non-brand white letter newsletter about estate planning topics. And if you are in a small nonprofit, you think, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Well, that's okay. If you can't, there are other ways you can get that message out, weave it into the communications that you do have. And like Juan said, get it to volunteers, get it to faithful donors, get it to people who are regularly engaged with you, so that they see that you're a place that's open for it. Because I think a lot of it is folks just don't recognize it.
Here's another good question for you, Jack, to start out with. It asks, I work for a nonprofit part-time and I'm trying to encourage donors to especially look at their IRA insurance beneficiary designations, IRA/insurance beneficiary designations. Mm-hmm. Is that still a good approach without actually advising? Where is the line as a development staff?
Yeah, I would encourage both of those. I don't think that crosses any kind of a line. I would find ways to weave that into messaging. The IRA distribution is probably, of those two, if those were the only 2 tools in the kit, I would reach for the IRA distribution probably a little bit more frequently, just because that's what I've had the most experience with. But there are a fair number of people who do have whole life insurance policies that you might be able to benefit from being, named a beneficiary of. And so I would not hesitate to chase that down.
Great. Juan, anything you want to add, or we have some other questions here too?
Well, I'm seeing a question, Nick. I don't know if you have it there. Just to add to that question, but about someone that's asked that they've started having discussions on starting a planned giving program, and they'd like some guidance on how nonprofits can educate and bring awareness to state lawyers, tax accountants, and how it can translate into them helping clients come to a decision.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've found very useful for institutions to do is have a planned giving committee. And you can do this even if you're a younger organization or you don't have a huge development budget. You can have a planned giving committee, which is made up of volunteers who are predominantly estate lawyers, tax accountants, financial advisors, people that deal with the types of planned giving issues that we've been talking about today. So you get them, and you do 2 things by getting them. You get a group of people that will agree to do this. One, you have a bunch of professionals that if you do get a question about somebody that wants to put something in their will, somebody that wants to leave an IRA, and you don't have staff that can answer the questions, you can turn to these group of professionals who can help you and even speak to the client for you and tell them, this is how this works. You should go see your attorney, but this is how this works. And the second thing it does is you have a group of professionals who are out in the community, who know people, learning more about your institution. So, they're going to be at a happy hour, they're going to be at a cocktail party, and somebody's going to say, hey, have you ever heard of this organization? Well, actually, I'm involved in it, and this is what they do. So having that, I think having that planned giving committee is something that's easy to do, and that can benefit an organization a great deal.
I'll say that, as an investment advisor, one of the things we like to do at Manning & Napier is, for our nonprofit clients, at least try to give them insight into our knowledge about how high net worth investors feel about certain things. We giving them insight into different vehicles that they might use for their charitable giving, give them insight into how retirement planning typically works. So yeah, I mean, having that good, as you pointed out, Juan, having that good, strong network of professional advisors to sort of surround your organization with, not only gives you a big network to meet more donors and meet more people, it gives you a network of experts to ask when you have questions.
And I would add to that, because I've been the beneficiary of those kinds of relationships as well. It's also nice when it comes time to effect a gift, or when a gift is coming in. It's nice if you've already established some kind of rapport with a professional advisor that's helping engage that gift, even if it's just a garden variety stock gift. I've gotten a fair number of stock gifts that come through. When they transfer through the broker to broker system, they don't have the donor's name attached to it. But if I know the sending broker, I can call and avoid awkwardness with a donor and say, hey, did you guys just prefer a gift of 100 shares of Pfizer stock? Yeah. Do you mind sharing the donor's name? I'd like to, send them a receipt and a prompt thank you. Yeah. And I don't know who it is. And a lot of times they will. And I've actually got in my higher ed days, I had a couple of donors that gave the same stock every time. And so I got to where it was a really easy call, because I could basically call and say, hey, did Nick just forward some United Healthcare stock to us? And she'd go, yep. All right, thanks. Yeah.
No, the tricks of the trade, for sure.
Yeah.
There's one more question. The second part of this question up here, I think this will be the last one, and then we can depart. But what returns should be yielded from your plan giving efforts? How should we measure a successful and competent plan giving program? That's the second part of this question that I think you referred to before, Jack. So what do you guys think about sort of measuring the competency and measuring the success of a plan giving program?
Just jumping off of it, I'm actually working on my metrics for next year, the KPIs that we're identifying for our team for the next year. Anyway, today, actually, in about 50 minutes, I have a meeting about that. One of the ones that I would say is a decent one to use is just the number of identified planned gifts. And you can make that description as tight or as loose as you want to be, whether it's trusts that we're beneficiaries of, or bequests, folks that have told us that we're in their will. Some things you can measure and book depending on your accounting. If you do an accrual accounting basis, we've got some irrevocable trust instruments where we've booked it. So it's book revenue carried on our assets, on our balance sheets. And so that's the real easy stuff. The trickier stuff is these folks who say, yeah, you're in my estate plan. And, in the conversation, it becomes evident that you're not going to find out any more detail than you're in my estate plan. Well, I'm of the mind that, I don't necessarily I'm not going to push the donor into an uncomfortable spot to get that information. If it becomes, evident to me that that's all I'm going to know, I'm going to just say thank you. We appreciate that. We do have a society where we recognize our plan giving donors. Would you like to be a member of that society? And usually they'll say yes to a question like that. Go back and, click a tab on their record that says member of Plan Gift Society. And then that way, at least you can, you can follow up with that person or know that that person has made provision for you.
Oh, very good. Very good. Thank you. That's all the questions we have, and that's about all the time we have for today. So Jack, you'll make it to your next meeting in time. Juan, thank you very much for your time and efforts also. Gentlemen, both of you, thank you just for sharing your experiences today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be with y'all.
Bye-bye, everyone.